about the last two sketch pages that I completed, and for December I had this page with 4 twigs, 4 different types of twigs, and January my first page is this one, which is also twig based study, twigs and mosses and lichens, and there's a skull as well. But I'll go through them both individually and talk about what I did and why I did it and how I did it, kind of what's included. So this page is 4 twigs, as you can see, broken twigs, and I collect these after the storm. We had a storm pier, and it left a lot of broken twigs on the ground, and so I collected them up and I chose a diverse selection. Now, the first thing you maybe notice is that I've got 4 on the page, and generally speaking we're told that we shouldn't use even numbers, that odd numbers are more interesting than even numbers, but there are exceptions, I feel, when that doesn't really apply. And here I think that the 2 and 2 kind of idea works because they're all completely different. It's not like having 4 flowers of this or 4 twigs of the same subject in a row. It's 4 completely different subjects, and they're kind of broken up with colour charts and notes and things as well, so it doesn't really apply that rule of odds thing. I think that they sit well, and I considered adding another one, but it just didn't work. It only really worked with 2 on each page, so 4 collectively. And I tend to do always double page spreads anyway, so the concept was just simply broken woody material after the storm. So I started off with this ash twig here. It's an ash. You can see the little black dots on it and this sort of pale, fairly pale bark, and then a lovely xanthoria lichen on it, this lovely orangey yellow lichen, which I used some new gamboge for, and perylene maroon in this case. You could use different yellows. I thought that worked quite well. It's got this lovely little mossy bit on the tip, and it's like a lollipop, really. You know, it's got this round thing. It's quite unusual. I thought it was quite novel. I've still got it, but it's in a kind of decayed state now. It's dried up, the moss. And I thought it worked quite well by contrast with this lichen on a much thinner twig, which I don't really know what the twig is there, no idea. But it seemed to work quite well with these 2 sort of rounded forms sitting together at a diagonal. And then we've got the sort of echoing of colour here in this lichen on this dark branch, which kind of ties things together a little bit. You know, I like to tie things together but have them different. So this lichen is, when it's wet, it's really green and swollen. When it dries, it's not really like that. It's more yellow and blue-green, more like you would normally see, but when that's wet it goes very green and swollen on the branch. And so that's how I painted it, how it was. It was very green, it was noticeably green. And so we have all these lovely little tiny fruiting bodies on it, which are fun to paint, using a small brush size brush to paint all these tiny little round fruiting bodies, and then in between them painting the negative space. And when you paint lichens like this, you need to paint the negative space, so you see these areas overlapping and dark areas in between. You start with those darker areas between things and paint, and then add the colour on top and gradually build up. The branch, I think, is hawthorn. It's very dark and it was wet, so I used a blue to give that sort of appearance of it being wet and dark. So there's a strong cobalt blue underneath, and some French ultramarine I think I used as well, and then a dark, almost black, but it's a purple bias black, using andanthium blue and a red and a yellow to make this almost black but with a slight purple bias. And the final twig was the silver birch, and there was lots of that broken on the ground, and you can see it's got this lovely rust kind of coloured it in the branches, and So I thought that would be a nice contrast as well. It's got a nice lichen on it here again, which kind of ties it into the other ones. So there's no theme and a theme, if you like. The theme is bound by the fact that they're all twigs, but they're all different. But there are certain features and colours that complement each other's within the two pages. So got these sort of bands across the surface, so we can paint them across the contours of that surface, creating that roundness as it's moving away from you. You can see the base of the stick here as well, so you can see that roundedness. Nice highlight on it because it's shiny. There's not much shine on any of the others apart from that's just that little area there and here. So I used a little bit of the Daniel Smith lavender underline, and also on this receding edge sort of violet type lavender colour there, paler on the edge, and then the form shadow with those lovely colours in it, and the highlight, and then some colour on this side that's paler on the light side. So those little sort of fissures in the surface help you with that contoured appearance and that shiny surface there. So that was my December page, and it's really just about finding things that appeal to you visually and putting them on a page and arranging them on a page in a way that's appealing, and that's why it's always useful to place these things on the page and see how they look together, see how those colours complement each other, and the shapes, you know, like these two rounded shapes here, they complement each other. So my first page for January is this one, and again the weather has been absolutely terrible, and so I decided that I would do more broken branches. I'm not entirely sure what it is. I toyed with the idea of it being a birch, but I'm not really sure. It could be anything really, but it's got some light bark there. But it's lost a lot of these lichens now, but it's completely encrusted in them. They keep snapping off. So I thought I'd do that one. So I put that in my retort stand and had it in front of me. And you can just about see it there on my left-hand side. So it's quite easy to work on something like this on your desk because it's right in front of you. So I've got this smallish sort of retort stand that can position it, and it's got a very heavy base there. So you can have that positioned on your desk, and so you can take your time with it. There's no rush. Nothing's going to shrivel up and die here. I've got a piece of bark with moss on it. I think it's a swan neck thyme moss. And I've painted that before. In fact, last January, in fact, in my first page of the year last year, 2023, was also, I had moss, and it was an ash tree that was completely covered in moss. Same moss as this year. Not by any design, just happened to be what's around at this time of year. So this was kind of lying on the ground everywhere, you know, you can find it all over the place. When it's been windy, it breaks off and find pieces of it in the ground. So I thought that was a nice, again, complementing the colours. So we had some greens on the main branch, as well as these folios, I think a Parmelia lichen, which is a blue-grey on top, quite large lichen with this black underside with these little rootlets that attach to the branch, but also towards the terminal end of the branch, which I haven't even finished off, there's greens, and so that green ties in here. And I also decided to include a skull for some reason. I just thought it would be nice to have a skull, and I've had this skull for years. I think it's a crow, I'm fairly certain it's a crow. And there's lots of crows in the fields at the moment, so it was just sitting there in front of me in the windowsill, so it seemed as good a reason as any to include it in the page. And so you're probably wondering how I come to arrange these things on the page or decide, and I don't really have much of a planning process. I just choose something that appeals to me, and then maybe I'll see something else. So this is just found objects, and the main thing is this branch. The branch is the predominant feature here, whereas in the previous page we had 4 branches of equal kind of importance. On this page I have this large branch, so that's going to be the key feature across the page. So that goes down first, and that's going to be painted in the most detail. And then, so that's like the main act, if you like, and the rest of it is the supporting acts. So the moss and the skull are secondary to this main branch, but they also have some importance in making an interesting and attractive page. and the colours complement each other well. I also decided to put this paler branch behind because without it, it felt a little bit empty in the middle. And so I thought, well, I'll just put a pale version. So to give the effect of aerial perspective, where things that are further back are paler, less saturated, a bit more blue. And so that's why it's painted in very lightly and roughly behind. So it fills a space, but it also creates more depth and dimension and interest to the page. And that's why I included that second branch. The colour studies I just fit around the page, nearest to where they're relevant to. So I have my primary colours annotated in numbers, and then the mixes, I'll put the mixes of the primaries together, dotted around the page, nearest to the subject that they relate to. So there's 6 colours used in this page, and then you can see that I put smaller numbers where there's less of a certain colour. So for example, this sort of brown, purpley brown colour in Dancing Blue, Perylene Maroon, and transparent yellow we used here, and that's number 1, number 2 and number 3. So number 1 plus number 2 and a small amount of the third colour, and that's how I annotate them. So if it's a small amount, I'll put a smaller number high up. Lots of detail in this, quite a bit of time required painting this foliose lichen and various sort of mossy bits on it as well. So using combination of brushes from a size 3 Winsor & Newton Series 7 miniature to a size 1 of the same, and also a Raphael size one I used. I made a note of the date because we were moving into a new year, so that sort of marks a junction in the book. I don't have a separate book for every year, I just continue until the book's full and then move on to a new book, so it's continuous. And you can see there's lots of notes on this page. There's a lot of it's anecdotal, notes about what was going on with the weather at the time, or what animals or species were around. Then the sketches, you can see the skull sketch there is drawn. It's got the working lines left in, showing the sort of symmetry of the skull where I measured it from the centre point and the outer parts. Got a little detail there I've added of the foliose lichen with the back of it showing those little rootlets that attach the branch. And it gives a fairly sort of comprehensive page of visual and written information. And it was a slightly different and unusual page compared to some of my others. I thoroughly enjoyed doing it, and that of course is the main thing. You must enjoy doing these things and learn a little from it and experiment with your techniques in order to develop and grow your sketchbook style and pages.